Ken Gray was first elected to Congress in 1954. He would serve for 24 years, spanning parts of 4 decades, working alongside giants of 20th century American politics.
I served 20 years with Gerald Ford.
A powerful force in Congress, Gray brought several presidents to visit Southern Illinois, including Ronald Reagan.
In '88, I brought him out here during the drought.
Ken Gray was born in 1924 in West Frankfort and graduated from Frankfort High School. He served in World War II as a chopper pilot before winning a seat in Congress at age 30 during the Eisenhower administration.
I always tried to work very close with the Republicans.
At the time, Southern Illinois was an impoverished region, and he set out to bring home as much federal money as he could, earning the nickname the Prince of Pork. Gray was instrumental in building Rend Lake, now a water source for tens of thousands of people and a popular recreation site. He also led the effort to build Interstate 57 through the heart of the region.
The industry was passing us up because of antiquated roads.
Gray reflected on the negotiations during the 50th anniversary of the highway.
I said, there'll be 57 will come through Southern Illinois, or there won't be any 57.
A stretch of I-57 now bears his name. Ken Gray also made a name for himself, establishing new safety regulations for the coal industry. His motivation, the 1951 explosion in West Frankfort that killed 119 men. He brought President Jimmy Carter into a Southern Illinois mine.
Jimmy Carter is the only president that's ever been down in a coal mine while in office.
After leaving Congress, Gray became an elder statesman in Southern Illinois, still a regular at political events.
This country is safer and better because of men like him that serve. Don't you agree?
He also opened what he called his Presidential Museum, a building full of political and other memorabilia. It operated in West Frankfort for many years, then in Marion. Ken Gray was never shy about promoting his legacy. His museum included a section dedicated to the $7 billion he says he brought to Southern Illinois during his time in Washington. Investments paying off to this day, reflecting in his later years he was proud of his contributions to the growth of this region.
I'm not going to take credit for all the progress in all these towns. We just provided the tools.
Gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 601? Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 of those present.
Mr. Speaker.
What purpose, gentleman from Pennsylvania, rise?
On that, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Gentleman requests yeas and nays. Those in favor of taking this vote, the yeas and nays, rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number. Pursuant to Clause 501, the chair's prior announcement, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed.
After a long and fruitful career, having served with the gentleman from Illinois the first 20 years of his service on the Public Works Committee, I am fully aware of his capabilities, of his dedication, of his never-failing good humor, but I especially would want to express my thanks to him for having shared so generously of his time during this 100th Congress to preside actually more often than any other member of the House. And so I want to thank him for that.
First, I want to thank the Speaker profusely for those kind words. I feel like the old lady that was kissed in the dark. She didn't know where it came from, but she liked it. I don't know where you got all those accolades, but I like them. And I want to return the favor. I want to say that 34 years ago, as I sat on that front row and was sworn in with our distinguished speaker, Sam Rayburn told me, always try to do it right the first time, because you can't sit on every wagon tongue and explain all the details to every farmer. And I want to say to you, out of the 34 years off and on I've been in this House, I think the 100th Congress, under your leadership, has produced more constructive legislation, and you've been the best speaker I've ever served under, and I want to return the favor. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, first I want to thank our friend from Michigan for taking this time and for yielding me some time. Mr. Speaker, greater love hath no man than this, than he who is willing to lay down his life for his friends. Bobby Kennedy laid down his life for his friends. And how appropriate it is on this 20th anniversary of his untimely death that we would take the well of this house to reflect upon his life and on the memory, and certainly as one that had the great honor and privilege of serving with not only President Kennedy but Robert Kennedy as United States Senator. They both enriched my life tremendously. And I know as we stand here today and reflect on those 20 years, we know that this country is better off and the citizens are better off because Bobby Kennedy and certainly John Kennedy came our way. As has been alluded to by previous speakers, Bobby Kennedy had enough time in life with his busy schedule to stop and talk along life's pathway to the poorest, or he could talk to the richest. He had a faculty for getting along with everyone. And as I walked over here, I thought, well, what could I say that's not going to be redundant and repeated over and over? And I came across these words from an unnamed author that I think fits this occasion and certainly fits the one that we're honoring today, United States Senator Robert Kennedy, because he had time to think about America and he had time to think about its people and what their needs were. And the title of this, of these words is Take Time. And I'd like to share it for the record and dedicate it in memory of our dear friend, Robert Kennedy. It says, take time to work, it is the price of success. Take time to think, it is the source of power. Take time to play, it is the secret of perpetual youth. Take time to read, it is the fountain of wisdom. Take time to worship, it is the highway to reverence. Take time to be friendly, it is the road to happiness. Take time to laugh, it is the music of the soul. And here, this really fits Robert Kennedy. Take time to dream, it is hitching your wagon to a star. And so I dedicate those words and say that I'm happy to join with my other colleagues in looking back over 20 years and say, thank you, Robert Kennedy, for enriching our lives.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 6061, legislation designating a post office building in West Frankfort, Illinois, as the Kenneth James Gray Post Office Building. I would like to thank Chairman Waxman and Chairman Davis for working with me on this legislation and for bringing the legislation to the floor today. Congressman Gray was born and raised in West Frankfort, Illinois. He was first elected to the House of Representatives in 1954, serving through 1974. In 1984, Ken ran again and was elected to the House and served 2 more terms. When I was elected to the House of Representatives in 1988, Kenny Gray was very helpful to me. We worked together and fought to improve housing, education, and to bring jobs to Southern Illinois. We, of course, continue that fight today with my colleagues in the Illinois delegation. Prior to his tenure in Congress, Congressman Gray earned 3 Bronze Stars for his service in World War II. He also owned a car dealership and operated an air service in Benton, Illinois. After retiring in 1988, Ken remained active in community affairs, serving on several boards and heading up many local projects to further economic growth in our region. Naming this post office after Kenny Gray will serve as a lasting reminder of his accomplishments in Southern Illinois. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to join me in honoring our former colleague and friend by supporting this legislation.
In Southern Illinois, everyone knows Ken Gray. And he's lovingly called. In this environment, it's always hard to figure out what past Congress is, but he is admired and adored for and lovingly called the Prince of Pork for a couple reasons. Probably a lot more than I even know, since I'm a youngster to this institution. But for helping President Eisenhower pass the Federal Highway Transportation bill, which brought the interstate highway system, and then lobbying diligently to make sure that those routes came through Southern Illinois. And although Southern Illinois continues to struggle along the interstate routes that are part of my district and part of Congressman Costello's district, where there's jobs and economic activity, they're around the hubs of the interstate highway system. So he does get great credit for that. Also, a major water lake, Wren Lake, is there that provides water for much of the communities of Southern Illinois. and that was all part of his due diligence and his activity. I also like the story, being a veteran of Ken Gray, lying about his age, going into the war, and then serving honorably in World War II and being awarded 3 Bronze Stars for his service. He's quite the character, and people who know him and have served with him can tell you some quite colorful stories. He's welcomed me in the institution as a colleague, and I look to him for advice and counsel when I get into the deep part of Southern Illinois. I think this is a fitting tribute. I thank my colleague, Congressman Costello, for bringing it forward, and I implore and ask my colleagues to support this naming of this post office. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
14 years ago, I was asking a question of the then Administrator, General Key. How are you coming, General, on the collision avoidance devices? And he said, just around the corner. Mr. Speaker, I served another term in Congress, retired for 10 years, and came back, and the first question I asked last year of Admiral Ingham, the present FAA Administrator, Admiral, how are you coming on the collision avoidance system, TCAS? And just, Mr. Speaker, the same words, just around the corner, 14 long years later. So without, as I said, the inertia, debate has been concluded on certain motions to suspend the rules. Pursuant to Clause 5 in Rule 1, the Chair will now put the question on each motion to suspend the rules on which further proceedings were postponed.